Okay, now let's slide over and take a look at Part B. Okay, Part B you see on the bottom, it says calculate earnings and dividends growth rates for 3 companies. And then they tell us a hint, Edelman's EPS growth rate is 8%. Okay, now there's a few different ways we can calculate the growth rate. I want to slide over and we'll work on Part B. They sort of bring us down a little bit. Why don't I introduce the formulas? When we talk about a growth rate, we're talking about the compound annual growth rate. So let me slide this over. And this is typically the formula that you would use, right? So a compound annual growth rate, ending value divided by the beginning value raised to the power of 1 divided by the number of years minus 1. And that'll give you the growth rate. Okay, now you could solve it that way and you'll come up with the right answer. In fact, we'll do that in a little bit. But another way to come out with the compound annual growth rate is simply to use Excel's rate function, because that's what it does. When we learned about the time value of money, we knew that rate calculated the rate of compounding interest. So if we have 2 values at different points in time, the rate function can solve it. And they gave us it's 8%. I'll show you how you can use the rate function to do it. I'll just hit the F2, hit my f of x button, the function. You'll see that what I've done is I've entered 5 years, right? 2002 to 2007 is 5 years. And there's no payments. The present value for, I'm moving this out of the way so you can see it, is the 2002 earnings per share was 8,160. You see it there. And then the future value, I enter it as a negative because, remember, Excel's expecting 1 to be an inflow and 1's an outflow, was 12,000. And we have no other variables. And if we give that, we just hit OK and you get 8.0%. And that's the growth rate using Excel's Excel function. Okay, now what I've done is I've brought through another formula that you can use to solve the growth rate as well. You could solve it with the compound annual growth rate, which we've listed here. You can use Excel's rate function. But if you think about it, if we take 1 plus G for earnings per share or dividends per share and raise it to the power of 5, multiply that times the earning per share in year 2002, and set that equal to the earnings per share in year 7, if we solve for G, that's another way we can solve the growth. And by the way, doing that does involve the same formula. And let me illustrate how to do that. I want to illustrate it first using Word, only because showing raised powers in Excel in a single cell is a bit tricky to do, and I really didn't want to go through that kind of effort. Instead, I'll just walk over how I can solve it using this formula. So let me slide this over. And we can just slide on down and I'll show you what we did. Okay, so let's see. We can see the formula here. You know what, if I move this down a little bit, then we can see all of it. Okay, so what do we see here? We have the formula. And you can see that what you do is you take 1 plus G raised to the T equal to 5, right? 5 years, times the earnings per share in year 2002, which is 8,160, would equal the 12,000 earnings per share in years 2007. Then if we divide through by the earnings per share in year 2002, so we're dividing by 8,160, we get 1 plus the growth rate raised to the power of 5 equal to some value, and that value is 1.470588. Okay, then to get rid of the power, we just take both sides raised to the power of 1/5, right? And then what we wind up with is 1 plus G will equal whatever 1.470588 raised to the 1/5 is, and it comes out to be 1.08015. Well, once we do that, simply subtract G from both sides. And by the way, you're working that other problem now. G equals 0.08 or 8.0%, the same as we got in Excel. And hopefully you see, let me slide on up a little bit here. Hopefully you see, I'll slide this one over. Just lay it on top. Excuse me, I wanted to bring the original one over. Okay. And my point is hopefully that you will see that when we're taking 1 divided by the other raised to the power of 1 divided by the number of years to number 1, that's exactly what we did down here. If you go through the steps, you see we eventually subtracted out 1, raised it to the power of 1/5. And that's how we would solve the growth rate for earnings per share using essentially the compound annual growth rate formula method given here, or you can start off by using it in this sort of modified version of the formula and solve for it. Okay, now the last thing I want to do is just illustrate the formula approach, how you'd use it using Excel. Okay, so there's a little bit more complication here. Let me bring some of this to light. Okay, so 1 plus G raised to the 5th power would be equal to, and now I'm taking the 12,000 divided by the 8,160. So I just want to show you how I did use Excel to solve this as well. Okay, and once we do that, we can take both sides of the equation to the power of 1/5. And with Excel, the way you would do it, let me hit the F2 key so you can see what the formula looks like. You'd hit the equal power, and that will drive up these function arguments for the power function. And the number is in cell N42, right? So that's the row right above. And we raise it to the power of 1/5. And you can see it sort of coming through here. Slide over a little bit. You can even see all of it. Okay? And so that gives us our 1.08. And then, of course, solving for G, we simply subtract 1 from it. And I've done that simply by taking the value there, minus 1 from it, and changing the format into a percent. Okay, now I've moved that formula out of the way so we can solve the rest of the problem. The growth rate for Edelman, for DPS, this is part B, we need to determine the earnings and dividends growth rate for all 3 companies. I'm going to go back to using the Excel method, and I'll just copy, right? That's the rate function, and I've got the information appearing on line 37, so it just references 5 years and the values M37 and N37. We went through that just a minute ago. So if I just copy that down, I get the growth rate for dividends per share, and it's 7.4%. Okay, that's for Edelman. Probably should label that. Okay, and now we'll calculate the growth rate and the dividends for the other 2 companies. So I'll just copy this down and jot in their names here. Okay, now to tackle Kennedy and Strasberg, the first thing that you saw is the screen changed a little bit. All I did is created a table so we can organize this a little bit better. And I moved the formulas that you've already seen me calculate, right? Okay, so with Kennedy, we'll just use the rate function as well to determine the growth in earnings per share. Let me get the color to look right, and we'll say equal rate, left paren, then I'll go hit the function button or the insert function button. It looks like an F sub X right above the letters that appear as column headings in Excel. And the number of periods we know is 5. Let me sort of move this so you can see this. There's no payment. The present value would be what we know from the information about the dividend, the earnings per share. Okay, now I've slid over so that you can see what those values were. So the earnings per share, we'll put this right down here now, for Kennedy in 2002 was $3. I'll enter the 3, and then the future value in 2007 was $4.50. We enter it as a negative because it's assuming one is an input and one is a cash inflow and one is a cash outflow. And based on that, we can then move it over. It's coming up with 8.4%, and which is the correct number. So we'll hit OK. And if I slide back over again, you'll see we drop that in there, turn that to a percent, and we get the 8.4. Okay, then we do the same thing with dividends per share. Now, rather than sliding, well, actually, what I'll do is I'll slide over so you can see the data. Then I'm entering equal rate again in a cell that you can't see, but I will hit the function and we'll see the function arguments. 5 periods. Slide on down so you can see the dividend per share value. There's no payment. The present value, Kennedy's dividend per share is $1.50. Just to the left of my mouse. 2007, it's $2.25. Enter that as a negative. And we come up with 8.4 again. We hit OK. And I'll slide back over. And you'll see that there's the 8.4. Format this one the same, and 8.4 again for Kennedy. Okay, then we repeat the function for Strasbourg, equals rate. And this time, we could hit the function bar and you can see it, or I'll just type it in. Let me slide a little bit down so you can see what I'm talking about. When I hit that, you get a little blue screen that tells you that you can enter the parameters and see what they are right there. So number of periods is 5. There's no payment. The present value for Strasbourg, you can see it in the top left of your screen. It was $5.50. The future value we enter as a negative is $7.50. And that's all we need to enter. The other things we can leave blank. Turn that to a percentage, and we come up with, let me get it the right way, 6.4%. And we'll do one more. Equals rate. This time I'll go back to using the pop-up screen because I sort of like that. 5, no payments, present value, dividends per share right above the screen looks like 2.75 for Strasbourg, and then it went to 3.75 to the left of my mouse. We have it given. Oh, and that has to be a negative or we're going to get an invalid answer. Okay, and we'll format this one just like that. And we've taken care of Part B. Now, Part C says, on the basis of your answer to Part A, do you think Edelman's stock would sell at a price in the same ballpark as that of Kennedy and Strasbourg, the range of 25 to 100 per share? Well, look ahead here, or look up top here, and we see Strasbourg and Kennedy, it's Kennedy in the first column, Strasbourg in the second, are selling at a price of $36 to $65 a share, with earnings per share at less than $10 per share. We slide over, and what we calculated in Part A was earnings per share was $8,000 to $12,000, with dividends per share, way higher than a single-digit dividend, which was what we saw with the other two companies. So no, it's obvious that Edelman's stock would not sell in the range of $25 to $100 per share. It should sell at something significantly higher, and that's because they only have 100 shares of stock outstanding. Okay, also its book value per share is also significantly higher than what we've seen in the other two companies as well. Now, keep in mind that if they did go to market and try to sell the stock based on earnings per share and dividends per share, it may have difficulty finding investors since that price seems to be so out of line in relation to what typical companies' stock price trade at.